In a time when kingdoms rose and fell like the tides of the sea, one man would carve his name into the very bones of Europe. Born to a legacy of warriors, Charlemagne would inherit not just a throne, but a dream to unite a continent. From the dark forests of the Franks to the halls of power in Aachen, his story is written in both blood and brilliance. He fought battles that reshaped borders, forged alliances that would echo through centuries, and faced enemies who sought his downfall. Crowned by the Pope himself, Charlemagne became not just a king, but the first emperor of a new Europe. Under his reign, learning blossomed, arts flourished, and the seeds of a cultural renaissance were sown. Yet even a titan has his twilight. His empire stretched wide, but cracks began to form beneath the surface. From victory to legacy, his life was a saga of ambition, power, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Today, we journey through the life of the man history calls the father of Europe. This is the story of Charlemagne, his triumphs, his struggles, and the empire that would change the world forever. If you love diving deep into the lives of history's greatest legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Join us and witness history like never before. Europe of that era was beyond imagination. Small kingdoms constantly waged wars against each other, and every king shed blood to defend his throne. It was into this world that Charlemagne was born, a child who would not only inherit his father's legacy, but also shape the destiny of centuries to come. Charlemagne was born in 742 AD, the son of Pepin the Short. Pepin had worked tirelessly to strengthen the Frankish kingdom and had prepared his son not merely as an heir, but as a leader for the future. Charlemagne's early years were spent in the dense forests and small towns of Francia, where each day was filled with lessons of combat, strategy, and politics. He grew up at a time when the Frankish kingdom was teetering between its peak and decline. Small tribes, rival kings, and political intrigue were a part of daily life. This environment nurtured in Charlemagne a natural leadership, which would later become the foundation for uniting Europe. This childhood was not only formative for his character, but also marked the beginning of the story of a great emperor. Every small lesson, every minor battle, and every passing moment served as a precursor to the greatness he was destined to achieve. The days of Charlemagne's youth were not merely a time for assuming the throne, but the true beginning of strengthening the Frankish kingdom and defeating its enemies. He devoted day and night to training his army, teaching every soldier that victory was achieved not only through bravery, but also through wisdom and careful planning. At the age of 28, Charlemagne faced his first test of leadership against the Lombard tribes. In the soft morning sunlight, the Frankish army stood lined up on the battlefield, while the roar of the enemy echoed across the land. The thunder of hooves, the clash of swords, and the determination of the soldiers turned the entire field into a living story. Charlemagne gave his commanders clear, commanding orders: hold the right flank strong, prepare the center, and never retreat. The Lombard forces were tough, experienced, and well-trained. They held their positions firmly, each attack sharp and organized. Charlemagne arranged his army in battle formation, closely monitoring the movements of every unit and exploiting the weaknesses of the opposing side. He personally oversaw the front lines, moving among his soldiers, driving back the enemy with sword strikes, and continuously motivating his troops. The battle against the Lombards continued for 2 days. The heat of the sun tested the soldiers' endurance during the day, while the harsh cold of the night challenged their perseverance and discipline. Charlemagne remained present at the front at every moment, demonstrating his leadership in action. He observed every attack, every defense, and every cavalry maneuver, issuing precise commands. His leadership kept the Frankish army organized, successfully repelling each enemy assault. At the age of 28, Charlemagne achieved victory over the Lombards in his very first campaign, strengthening the borders of Francia. The battlefield echoed with the cries of triumph, banners fluttered in the wind, and soldiers celebrated as a new era of leadership took shape. This triumph was not only significant in terms of territory, but also reinforced the morale of the Frankish army and showcased Charlemagne's active leadership. After securing the Lombard front, Charlemagne turned his attention to the Saxon tribes, ruthless and highly skilled warriors. At the age of 32, he launched night raids on their small villages, astonishing the enemy with the skill and precision of his forces. Torches flickered across the landscape, cavalry moved like shadows, and every calculated strike left the Saxons disoriented. With every victory, the borders of Francia expanded, and Charlemagne's fame spread to every corner of Europe. This period marked the most brilliant phase of Charlemagne's youth. Every battle, every front, and every victory strengthened his leadership and strategic foresight. He not only acquired territory, but also broke the morale of his enemies, forging his army into an invincible force. The echo of swords, the rhythm of marching feet, and the disciplined maneuvers of his troops became the signature of his rising empire. At the age of 32, Charlemagne had already demonstrated his tactical brilliance against the Lombards. Yet, the northern frontier remained unstable. The Saxons, fierce and unyielding warriors, refused submission. For years, Charlemagne directed relentless campaigns to incorporate their lands into the Frankish Empire. Night raids struck small Saxon villages, fires illuminated forests and riverbanks, and cavalry units swept through enemy hideouts, leaving no escape routes. Every front was meticulously planned. Scouts reported enemy movements, archers secured the flanks, and infantry formed impenetrable lines of defense. Saxon resistance was stubborn and adaptive. In open fields, shield walls collided, hooves thundered across the muddy terrain, and swords clashed through misty mornings. Charlemagne personally rode at the front, rallying his troops, countering enemy charges, and adjusting formations in real time. The campaigns extended over months, sometimes years, testing both the courage and endurance of his soldiers. By the age of 35, major Saxon fortresses had fallen, yet isolated pockets of resistance persisted, requiring constant vigilance and strategic precision. Meanwhile, in the east, the Avars posed a formidable threat. Their heavily fortified camps and mobile cavalry demanded flexible strategies. At 36, Charlemagne assembled a combined force of infantry, archers, and cavalry. Rivers and marshlands became tactical barriers. Engineers constructed temporary bridges and siege engines to breach defensive walls. The assaults were swift but coordinated. Artillery battered gates, infantry stormed walls, and cavalry flanked and scattered defenders. Night operations added another layer of precision. Torches lit up enemy encampments, while mounted units patrolled and prevented reinforcements. Charlemagne remained present at every front, assessing weaknesses, directing attacks, and issuing immediate orders. The Avars resisted repeatedly, but the disciplined coordination and battlefield strategy of the Frankish army neutralized every attempt. By the age of 38, many of our camps had been destroyed and key fortresses captured. By 40, Avar control weakened, and the Frankish Empire expanded eastward, securing vital trade routes and political leverage. To the south, The Bavarians presented a challenge requiring both diplomacy and military action. By 42, Charlemagne advanced rapidly through dense forests and rugged mountains. Minor skirmishes escalated into large-scale engagements, each resolved with precise timing and coordinated tactics. Cavalry flanked opponents, archers provided cover, and infantry advanced methodically. While asserting dominance, Charlemagne executed targeted operations against local chieftains. Some were captured, others compelled to swear allegiance, and military garrisons were established to prevent rebellion. By 44, Bavaria was fully integrated, though continued patrols and checkpoints maintained security across valleys and passes. Between the ages of 45 and 48, Charlemagne refocused on the Saxons. Exhausted yet unyielding, he conducted relentless campaigns. Every village, fortress, and forested pass became a battlefield. Cavalry patrolled continuously. Lightning raids prevented regrouping. Gates were battered, walls stormed, and enemy leaders captured. Forests and marshlands were monitored with no room for error. Small outposts and patrols ensured the enemy could not mount counterattacks. Small and large engagements formed a continuous chain of operations, weakening both the physical and psychological strength of the Saxons. Every victory reinforced the training, discipline, and cohesion of the Frankish army, turning it into a nearly unstoppable force. By the age of 50, Charlemagne's empire encompassed vast regions of Europe. The Saxons, Avars, Bavarians, and other tribes had been subdued or integrated. These decades-long campaigns were costly, but they forged not only territory, but also an army of unparalleled skill and discipline. Every maneuver, raid, and siege reflected Charlemagne's vision of a unified, secure, and powerful empire. The period from 32 to 50 defined Charlemagne's military genius, leadership, and role in shaping Europe. Every battle, every campaign, and every victory highlighted his strategic foresight and the strength of his forces, establishing him not only as a king, but as a master commander and the architect of Western Europe. The air of Rome was thick with the scent of destiny. Inside the Grand Basilica of St. Peter, thousands of candles flickered, casting golden light across the marble walls. All of Europe's eyes were fixed on one man, Charlemagne. He was no longer just the king of the Franks, but the architect of a realm that had united the entire Western world. Pope Leo III stepped forward. In his hands gleamed a golden crown, a symbol of divine authority and earthly power. As he placed the crown upon Charlemagne's head, the great basilica erupted with the sound of bells. Their echoes filled the city of Rome, announcing the birth of a new emperor, Charlemagne, the first ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. The crowd roared in jubilation, prayers whispered through the air, and the pulse of history beat louder than ever before. Charlemagne stood in silence, his eyes reflecting the dawn of a new era. This was more than a coronation. It was the proclamation of Europe's destiny. The sword of the conqueror had now bowed before the pen. After countless battles, Charlemagne had come to realize that the true strength of an empire did not lie only on the battlefield, but in the light of knowledge and wisdom. At around the age of 58, he transformed his royal court into a center of learning. Scholars, philosophers, and thinkers from every corner of Europe were invited to his palace. Among them, the great Alcuin of York became one of his most trusted advisors, opening new doors of education in the empire. Charlemagne himself was deeply devoted to learning. Every day, he studied with his teachers, tried to improve his writing, and showed keen interest in Greek and Latin sciences. Under his command, Schools were established in churches and monasteries across the realm. The art of calligraphy flourished, and ancient manuscripts were carefully preserved for future generations. Charlemagne now stood at the edge of old age, yet his gaze remained fixed on the future. He often sat in the palace garden, watching his scholars and students engage in deep discussions. Around him lay books, maps, and quills, the new weapons of his empire. Smiling gently, he would say, "This is my greatest army, the army of knowledge which will live for generations." As evening fell and lamps were lit, Charlemagne would look silently toward the sky, perhaps realizing that his empire no longer lived only on land, but within minds and books, forever enduring. It was an evening in Aachen, the chill of January likely in the air. In the palace chamber, candles flickered dimly, casting soft light across the walls. Charlemagne, now at the threshold of old age, lay on his bed, frail and weakened by illness. The physicians remained silent. Courtiers watched in deep sorrow. His son Louis stood nearby. The same great conqueror who had commanded armies for decades now battled a brief but serious illness. His final breaths came slowly. He raised his hand to look around, speaking faintly of faith, the empire, and guidance for the future. A whispered prayer, the soft toll of bells, and then silence fell. History recorded January 28, 814, as the end of a great era. He did not die on the battlefield, but in nature's gentle grasp, yet his image, wisdom, and decisions echoed across generations. The funeral scene in Aachen Cathedral was solemn and dignified. The cathedral was filled. Sacred chants, prayers, and rows of courtiers marked the occasion. Charlemagne's body, wrapped in a sacred shroud, was carried to its resting place. Nearby, religious leaders and courtiers slowly performed the rites. Those who had once sat on thrones bowed their heads, paying the last tribute to the conqueror. There was grief among the people, but respect too. An era had ended among the people, but respect too. An era had ended, and according to tradition, his body rested in Aachen, where future generations would honor his memory. Immediately after Charlemagne's passing, the crown was placed upon Louis the Pious, his son and heir, accepted for centuries to come. The question remains, will his successors maintain the unity he built with blood and wisdom? Will people remember him merely as a king or as the architect of a great empire? Because legends never die, and the story of Charlemagne will echo through time, waiting to be rediscovered. If you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow us for more epic stories from the past.